Hello, everybody. David here. Welcome. Here we share true stories from real people. Today, starting out with the first story. My jealous brother slept with my fiancée right after we got engaged, and now the whole family is done with him. I'm a 23-year-old man who just got engaged and then called off the engagement within 2 weeks. My fiancée, Riley, also 23, slept with my brother Adam, 27, the night after our engagement. My disgusting brother tried to rub it in my face to make me feel worse. Riley and I had been together for almost 3 years, but she threw it all away for my brother the night of our engagement. She told me she really wanted to marry me, but broke that promise the next day by sleeping with Adam. I was devastated and ended everything over text, blocking her afterward. I even changed the locks on our home so she couldn't come back. Riley and I had lived together for a year, and everything was going well, so I thought it was the right time to propose. I never imagined she would betray me with Adam of all people, knowing how fiercely competitive and unfriendly we were with each other. My father died in an accident when I was very young, so I have almost no memories of him. At least Adam got to spend some time with him, but I don't remember him at all. Adam never liked me, and growing up, he was my biggest enemy. He was always the bully, and my mom, being a single mother, didn't have much time to deal with our sibling rivalry, since she had more important things on her mind, like paying bills and putting food on the table every day. Our uncle, my dad's brother, visited often and tried to help as much as he could. My mom stayed in touch with my dad's family even after his death because they'd already lost their son. They didn't need to lose their grandson too. My uncle was practically the only father figure I had, and he's still the one person I trust. As for Adam, my mom wasn't biased, but if she had to pick a favorite, it would clearly be Adam. That made our sibling rivalry even worse, because I wanted to be the favorite too. Unfortunately, as a kid, I was always the loser. I wasn't good at sports and was at best average in school. I was pretty skinny and didn't have any standout talents, so I was always insecure about everything, which made it hard to talk to people, make friends, and be popular. I was really introverted and mostly kept to myself. Adam was the complete opposite. He played sports and was really good at them. He wasn't bad at school either and had a very different physique from mine, big and strong thanks to his sports activities. Needless to say, being his younger brother made me feel even more embarrassed because, even though no one said it outright, I knew everyone always compared me to him and thought I was a loser in comparison. Over time, I learned to live in his shadow and just let him walk all over me. My self-esteem really took a hit during my childhood, and I never fully recovered from that. Even by the end of high school, I barely had any friends, and no one wanted to talk to me because I seemed weird. Things only changed for me and started getting better when I graduated and went to college. I was the new guy there, and no one knew me as Adam's brother, so I really grew as a person. Now, I no longer had to face Adam's constant bullying, and I was finally able to be myself. I know this sounds cheesy, but I'm so grateful I was able to go to college in a state where no one knew me, because I don't think I would be the person I am today without that experience. And I have my uncle to thank for that because he's the one who paid for my college. My mom told me she couldn't afford to send me to a college that far away and wanted me to pick somewhere closer to home if possible, but I'd made up my mind, and my uncle offered to cover the costs and take care of it. I made a lot of friends there and graduated at the top of my class. My mom and uncle attended my graduation, but Adam didn't, even though I went to his. After I moved away, Adam and I lost touch for obvious reasons. He hated me for no reason, and I hated him because he made my childhood and teenage years a complete nightmare. I was glad to be rid of him, and we only saw each other during holidays or when we went home for birthdays. Years went by, and that's the arrangement we stuck to. We didn't consider each other family outside of the house, but I did console him and texted him when he lost all his money a few years ago. He quit his job and tried to start his own business, but it failed miserably, and our uncle and mom had to bail him out when he was deep in debt. He couldn't go back to his old job, so he had to move back in with our mom for a few months until he got back on his feet. Even when he finally found a job, it wasn't as good as his old one, but he took it because he wanted to move out of our mom's house in his late 20s and felt ashamed to still be living with her. This is what my uncle told me, and I was pretty disappointed that his life had completely fallen apart. I felt sorry for him, so I sent a consoling text, but I think he misunderstood and thought I was bragging or mocking him, so he blocked me and ignored me during the next few holidays. We weren't friendly when we saw each other, but we tried to keep things civil and at least say hello, no matter how cold it was. But after that text, there was no communication between us. I wish I could say Adam's life got better, but it didn't. The failure of his business really affected him, and every time I saw him after that, he seemed worse than before. My uncle told me he changed jobs 7 or 8 times after that, but he didn't seem happy with any of them. His clothes got shabbier, and you could see his mental state reflected in how he acted at family gatherings. He was always drinking or silently staring into space. Honestly, I really pitied him seeing him in that state. As a kid, I always hated him, but now it's hard to hate someone who's gone through so much. My uncle always tried to involve him in our conversations, but he never seemed interested and always left early. I had also started bringing Riley to these gatherings after we'd been together for a year. She knew about Adam and even seemed worried about him, but there wasn't much we could do. Fast forward to our engagement 2 weeks ago. Riley and I went to my uncle's house for his birthday dinner. First, I asked and made sure he was okay with me proposing during his birthday party, and he agreed, so I went ahead. The whole family would be there anyway, and my uncle has a nice house with a lovely garden, so it was a perfect spot. I even invited her parents, but they wouldn't arrive until after the proposal, so she couldn't suspect what was coming. After my uncle cut the cake and everything, I took her outside and popped the question. She said yes, and then we went back inside to tell everyone and celebrate. I noticed Adam left a few minutes after I announced it, but I didn't think much of it because I was pretty busy with everyone that night. And besides, he usually left family gatherings early, so it wasn't a surprise. Riley and I had a great night and then went back home. She didn't mention anything about Adam or his weird behavior after we got home, which she usually did whenever we went to any of my family's events. We were both drunk and tired, so as soon as my head hit the pillow, I fell asleep, but I had to wake up around 2 a.m. because I needed to use the bathroom. When I woke up, I noticed Riley was still on the phone, and when I asked who she was talking to, she said she was just telling a few friends about the engagement. That seemed innocent enough, so I didn't suspect anything and went back to sleep right after. But 2 days later, while I was at work, I got a bunch of texts from Adam. I was really surprised because the last time we talked, he blocked me. They were just screenshots of his conversation with Riley, and in those chats, they planned to meet up and have sex. And they did. It started with Adam texting her congratulations on the engagement, and she asked why he wasn't there the whole night. So he told her he was feeling down about a lot of things and wanted to leave as soon as he could because he didn't want to intrude on my happiness. He talked about how we were never friends and how he felt it was inappropriate for him to be there for such an occasion for me, so he left. He was trying to come off like a sad puppy that no one wanted, but the truth was I really wouldn't have cared if he'd stayed all night. He just wanted Riley to feel sorry for him, so he could manipulate her more easily. And that's exactly what happened. She started comforting him and saying she was there for him. She also said I was a good guy and wasn't trying to hurt him, so she apologized on our behalf if he felt bad about what happened. And Adam responded by saying he could never find someone like Riley, so he didn't even see the point in trying. That bastard started flirting with her, and she responded in kind, and suddenly they were planning to meet up. And I know for sure that she went to his place the night after our engagement because she told me she would be spending the night at her friend's house to tell her all about the engagement. On top of that, Adam sent me pictures of Riley's clothes on his bed, and that's all I needed to see. It was disgusting and sick, and it really broke me. But I took the day off from work and went home right after I got Adam's texts. I sobbed uncontrollably, but even through my tears, I decided to change the locks and pack everything I could find that belonged to Riley. Everything I found and knew was hers I put in a cardboard box, and when I was done I left it outside the door. By the time I finished doing all that, it was almost time for Riley to come home. I hadn't seen her since the night before because she told me she'd be working directly from her friend's place. But of course now I know she was working from Adam's place. I wanted to break up with her in person, but after a while, I decided it wasn't worth it because she had literally cheated on me the day after I proposed to her and promised to spend the rest of her life with me. I was so angry that I decided to end it over text. I sent her a message saying I knew she'd slept with Adam, and I didn't want to be with her anymore. I told her she disgusted me, and that all her stuff was outside, so she could pick up the box and leave because I didn't want to see her. If she forgot something in the house, she could come back for it later. I told her we were done, then sent the text and blocked her. A few minutes after sending that text, Riley came knocking on my door, begging me to let her in. She was very distressed, and I could hear it in her voice. She begged me to give her a chance to explain, and she kept telling me she knew she'd made a huge mistake, but she just wanted me to hear her out. It went on for about half an hour, and it was hard for me to keep calm and ignore it. But after she tried everything from crying to guilt-tripping and pleading, she finally left. To be sure, I didn't open the door for about an hour after the begging stopped to make sure she wasn't still waiting outside. When I was sure she was gone, I ordered takeout, had dinner, and tried to sleep, but I was so heartbroken that I couldn't close my eyes. I wanted to do something big to get back at Adam and really teach him a lesson, but I couldn't think of anything. I racked my brain for a while, and when I couldn't come up with anything, I decided to take the easy way out and just forward those screenshots to everyone in the family and say, "This is what my dear brother Adam did to me." Then I turned off my phone and went to sleep. Honestly, I didn't have a plan, nor did I set any conditions for my relatives, so what they did was voluntary, and I had absolutely nothing to do with it. Everyone in the family sympathized and told me they'd blocked him, and would cut ties with him completely. Everyone was shocked after learning what Adam had done to me and reached out to comfort me, except my mom. She didn't talk to me for the first few days after I sent that text to everyone, but a few days later she visited me looking very sad. I knew she wasn't going to sit and console me like the others. I was right because she came over to talk about my actions. She said she could understand that I was upset with Adam for whatever he'd done, and that was fair, but I should have refrained from making the matter public. Her reasoning was that Adam had suffered so much already because he was a grown man living with the memory of a failed business and had no prospects in his love life. He'd had a few failed relationships but nothing long-term, and that was especially sad because when he was younger, he was a really promising guy, so no one could have imagined he'd turn out to be such a failure and so miserable. On the other hand, no one could have expected me to succeed as I did, both in my career and my relationships. My mom believed Adam did this out of jealousy, which I already knew. For context, I work at an architecture firm and have a well-paying job. I worked really hard to get where I am, and if Adam had done more research on his business before diving headfirst into it, he wouldn't have failed, and he wouldn't be making less than half of what I do. But back to the main issue. When my mom said all this, it seemed like she was trying to justify what he did. So I interrupted her and asked if she was seriously trying to justify Adam sleeping with my fiancée the night after our engagement just because his life was sad and pathetic. She took a minute and then said that wasn't right, but I needed to understand where he was coming from and show a little sympathy and forgiveness. She went on to say that cutting Adam off from the family had affected him a lot, and he was suffering deeply. Family gatherings were all he had because he felt ashamed to be around his friends who were all so much more successful than he was. So he didn't keep in touch with them, and family was all he had. I'm glad for him, and I really don't care that he's suffering because he caused my relationship with Riley to end, so he deserves it, and I have no sympathy to spare for him. But my mom believed I should be the bigger person and talk to everyone to somehow convince them to give him another chance. Not only that, but she wanted me to reach out to him and clear the air. I told her I wasn't going to do any of that, and that she was crazy for expecting me to reach out to someone who deliberately ruined my relationship. I was really angry with her. I told her I knew she had favorites, even though it wasn't really obvious, but she didn't need to rub it in my face and make me feel so bad about it. I said if I had done the same thing to Adam, she wouldn't be trying to justify it and act like it wasn't a big deal. She'd probably be livid about it, I'm sure of that. She tried to deny it, and we started arguing. It turned into a big fight, and she was very upset and offended. She left the house after saying she wouldn't talk to me until I reached out to Adam and tried to make things right with him. It's been a few days, and my relatives are still checking on me. Mostly my uncle, who's been texting me every day. Riley has also been sending me messages from different numbers, hoping to get a call back or at least talk to me, but I haven't responded. I haven't blocked her on those numbers yet, but I know I eventually have to and will. The only person I haven't heard from since our big fight is my mom, and I really feel bad about that. I mentioned earlier that I knew my brother was her favorite because they always seemed to have this unexplainable bond, even when I was a kid. But my mom never showed favoritism, at least not until now. I just feel really confused about what she said. I'm happy with my life now, and it's not like I'm depressed or anything, but I really do want my mom in my life. But I don't agree with how she's handling the whole situation between Adam and Riley. What do you think? Was I wrong to send the evidence to the family about my brother and fiancé cheating on me? Update 1, the people have spoken, and the people have been heard. Thank you all so much for your comments on the original post, and for being patient enough to read it. I'm so glad so many of you gave me helpful advice on what to do next and reassured me that I wasn't wrong, because what my mom said really made me feel like I overstepped by doing what I did. But clearly that wasn't the case, and I don't need to reach out to anyone. I also talked to my uncle about what my mom said. I hadn't told anyone before because it was private, and I didn't want to discuss this with others, but my uncle is family, and I felt significantly better after talking to him. He said he also noticed that my mom always favored Adam over me. It wasn't always obvious, but it was definitely there, and anyone with half a brain could tell she had a favorite, and it wasn't me. He said he really felt bad for what happened to me because he knew how much I loved Riley, but she clearly didn't think things through before sleeping with Adam, despite knowing about our relationship. That's worrying, but there isn't much I can do about it, and honestly, that's fine because I like to think I dodged a bullet there. I'm not completely over her yet, but I know I'll get there. However, that's not really what's on my mind. My relationship with my mom is something I don't want to lose, but if she's acting like this and falling victim to Adam, I don't know how we can get along or reconcile. My uncle thinks I should let it go. He said he knows my mom and also knows that she won't back down if she thinks she's right. He told me not to hope that she'd change her mind and talk to me because that's very unlikely since she's been visiting Adam almost every day since our family cut him off. It's heartbreaking that she's still fully invested in him, even though I'm the one who actually lost a relationship because of him, and a pretty significant one at that. But I also understand that I can't change the situation, and it is what it is. That's something my uncle taught me, to accept things and let them go, and I guess that's what I have to do. I tried arguing with my mom and making her see the truth, but she doesn't care about the truth and only cares about making sure Adam gets all the support he needs. Well, that's fine by me, I guess. Update 2, it's been almost 2 weeks since I broke up with Riley, and she texted me almost every other day for about a week after we broke up, but then she stopped, probably after realizing that begging me to get back together with her wasn't going to work. And I didn't want to talk to her or hear her side of the story. I don't even know why she thought explaining her side would make things better because, as far as I'm concerned, nothing justifies cheating, and that's just how it is. But yesterday, she reached out to me and said she wanted to come by and pick up some things she left at my place. That's when I finally responded because now we're talking business instead of her begging me to talk to her and me ignoring all those texts. I told her she could come by today because I was off work anyway. and it was better to get it over with. So she came over around noon, and I could tell she was really upset. She looked worse than usual and didn't make eye contact with me once during her time there. I didn't say anything to her either after opening the door and letting her in. The house was silent as she packed up her things, and I sat on the couch in the living room, avoiding looking at her. After she finished packing, she said she was leaving. And even though I had a lot to say to her, I just said goodbye and went back to my phone. She didn't deserve anything more, and after that, she was gone for good. It felt strange, but in a good way, because this meant I'd never have to talk to her or receive her texts again, or have anything in the house that reminded me of her. I blocked her a few minutes after she left and decided to celebrate by watching our favorite movie by myself. I still haven't heard from my mom, but with time it's become easier to accept that. At least now I know for sure that she'll never side with me here, simply because I'm not Adam. So, no matter what I do for her, it'll never be enough, and honestly, I'm tired of trying. My uncle told me he also had an argument with her recently when he tried to defend me, and she didn't like that, so things between them aren't great either. I can't believe she's willing to sacrifice her relationship with both of us just to continue supporting Adam, knowing he's a piece of shit. It just doesn't make sense to me, but I guess if that's what she wants, then whatever. Update 3, it's been a month since I last posted here, and I can't believe that just a month ago, I was still complaining about my mom not loving me. But now I'm better, and I don't care what my mom thinks anymore. She's as delusional and selfish as my brother, and that's probably why they get along so well, because they're both horrible people. And I'm pretty unlucky to be related to both of them. But now, I have no ties to either of them, and I'm so grateful for that because they don't deserve someone like me, and neither does Riley. I was always too good for them, and if they can't see that, then that's their loss. I have no reason to feel bad about anything, and that's why I don't feel bad that no one in the family talks to them or invites them to any events. They simply have no more relationships with any of us, and I couldn't be happier about that. Riley and I haven't spoken since she came to pick up her things the last time because I blocked her after that, just like most of our mutual friends did after finding out the real reason our engagement was called off. But my mom tried to contact me a few days ago, and even now she doesn't think she needs to apologize to me, which is crazy to think about. Even in our most recent conversation, she kept insisting on how much Adam was suffering, and how he was diagnosed with clinical depression. I told her I could give her the number of a therapist, but nothing more, and I definitely wouldn't talk to our relatives now to make them sympathize with him. And then she started trying to manipulate me, getting emotional and sentimental. She really amped it up by saying she'd already lost her husband, and she didn't want to lose the two most important men in her life now, just because of some stupid fight over a girl. It's funny how she considers the fight stupid and trivial, because, as I recall, the fight wasn't over a girl. It was about my fiancée, and it was anything but stupid or trivial, because Adam deliberately cheated with Riley just because he wanted to make me feel bad. So I think I have the right to be mad at him and never want to talk to him again. As for the rest of our family, I didn't pressure them to do anything. They cut off Adam and my mom because of their own behavior, and I had absolutely nothing to do with that. So if they want to blame someone, they should blame themselves. That's what I told my mom before blocking her. Now I can finally move on with my life and let them go to hell. I care very little or not at all. Hello, everybody. David here. Welcome. Here we share true stories from real people. Today, starting out with the first story. My mother canceled my baby's shower behind my back because her golden daughter is getting a divorce, but I told everyone why her marriage is ending. I'm a 33-year-old woman, adopted by my parents after my birth mother abandoned me at a fire station when I was just born. My parents had tried for years to have a child, but despite all their efforts, they were unsuccessful. So they turned to adoption in the hope of filling the void in their hearts. My adoptive mother, whom I simply call Mom, would often tell me how she fell in love with me the moment she laid eyes on me. She said she felt an overwhelming love and knew immediately that I was her daughter. My parents worked tirelessly to bring me into their lives, and for that, I will forever be grateful. They went through endless paperwork, interviews, and home visits to ensure they could provide a safe and loving home for me. I can't imagine what my life would have been like in an orphanage if they hadn't adopted me. Not only did my adoptive parents give me a home, but they also saved my life in many ways. I was their first child, and for many years, I enjoyed their undivided attention and love. They showered me with affection and care throughout my childhood. However, unlike my parents, my maternal grandparents didn't want me. They constantly told my parents that adopting me was a huge mistake and refused to acknowledge or talk to me. Their coldness was evident and deeply hurtful, even though as a child I couldn't fully understand why they treated me that way. One particularly painful childhood memory was during Christmas. The entire family would go on holiday to my grandparents' cabin, where everyone exchanged gifts. It was a joyful and festive occasion, as it was my first time participating in the celebration. While everyone received gifts, my grandparents blatantly refused to give me anything. They insisted that I wasn't really part of the family, so they didn't feel obligated to give me anything. This led to a huge argument between my father and my grandparents. My father, angry and protective, chastised them for treating me differently from my cousins. He told them that I was part of their family because I was his and my mother's daughter, and their behavior toward me was unacceptable. Emotions ran high as he declared that he wouldn't participate in the celebration if they continued to exclude me. My mother, caught in the middle, tried to mediate. She asked my father to calm down, explaining that not everyone understood their decision to adopt. She tried to justify her parents' actions, saying they were old-fashioned, and begged my father not to take their words to heart. However, my father refused to back down. Since my mother wasn't willing to leave with him, he walked out with me. I remember feeling awful, even physically sick, thinking that somehow I was responsible for my parents' fight. Later, my father reassured me that it wasn't my fault, and that he loved me no matter what. However, the guilt lingered, mixed with the sadness of not being wanted by my grandparents. I wish I could say that over time, my grandparents' treatment of me improved, but unfortunately it didn't. Their coldness persisted, and my father, after seeing its impact on me, consciously limited contact with them for many years. He even stopped attending family functions altogether. My mother tried to bridge the gap, but my father never forgave my grandparents for treating me differently. Now, compared to my mother's side, my father's family was much more accepting and inclusive. From the beginning, they welcomed me with open arms, treating me as one of their own. My paternal cousins always accepted me without question, seeing me as a true member of the family. We shared countless holidays, birthdays, and family gatherings together. Even now, as adults, we still hang out and maintain close relationships. We travel together, celebrate milestones, and support each other through life's ups and downs. So, my life wasn't all that bad. I really enjoyed being my parents' only child for a long time. They always gave me everything I wanted and tried their best to make me feel cherished. Then, 7 years later, something incredible happened. Miraculously, my mother became pregnant with my sister. This news was completely unexpected, as my parents had lost all hope of having a biological child. My mother's pregnancy was like a blessing to everyone. While my parents and the rest of the family were thrilled about my mother's pregnancy, I couldn't help but feel a bit jealous and anxious. I feared that with a biological child on the way, their love and attention might drift away from me. This fear was exacerbated by knowing how my maternal grandparents viewed me, and I was afraid they might abandon me again. Luckily, my parents must have sensed my feelings, so they talked to me. They reassured me that I would always be their first daughter, no matter what. My mother also pointed out how now I would have a little sister to share my days with, which was exciting. After talking with them, I felt much better, and was eager to meet my sister. The day Claire was born, our entire family was overjoyed. I remember the delight I felt seeing her for the first time. Everything about her, from her tiny fingers to her bright eyes, seemed incredibly adorable to me, and being a big sister added a new dimension to my life. We were extremely close during her early years. Claire followed me everywhere, and even sometimes tried to mimic everything I did. Of course, like any siblings, we occasionally fought, but I loved her too much to stay mad at her for long. However, the real problems between us began when my grandparents started telling Claire, as she grew older, that I wasn't her real sister. At first, my parents were unaware of this because they occasionally left Claire at her grandparents' house for visits. But after each visit, Claire's behavior toward me gradually changed. She became dismissive and rude to me for no apparent reason. If I wanted to play with her or spend time together, she would snap at me until I left her alone. My parents noticed this change and tried to talk to her, but Claire never gave them a reason. So, they assumed it was just a phase she was going through. But things only got worse between us as we grew up. One day, I came home from school and found all the clothes in my closet had holes in them. There were random holes of different sizes cut into all my clothes. I thought I was going crazy, and that this must have been a mistake because there was no way all my dresses could suddenly have holes. My first instinct was to call my mother, who was also shocked and confused. She suggested it might have been mice, but the number of holes in all my clothes overnight made that explanation unlikely. We were both puzzled by this strange situation. Then, a few days later, I encountered another odd incident. My contact lenses, which I had left on the table before showering, mysteriously disappeared. I searched everywhere but couldn't find them. With no spare contacts, I couldn't attend class that day. When I told my parents, they scolded me for being irresponsible, thinking I had misplaced them. I tried to explain that I would never do that, but they didn't believe me and chalked it up to my forgetfulness. However, things escalated when I walked into my room one day after school and found Claire messing with my lipsticks at my vanity. I was stunned and asked her what the hell she was doing in my room. Claire turned around, looking guilty. As I approached the vanity, my heart sank when I saw that my collection of lipsticks, which I had gathered over the years, was completely destroyed. Frustrated and furious, I couldn't help but scream in disbelief. My mother rushed into the room to see what had happened and was shocked to see my ruined lipsticks. She asked Claire about her actions, but Claire just said she was playing. I know this might seem normal between siblings, but I knew my sister well, and this wasn't her usual behavior. Up until that point, I had always trusted Claire. I never suspected my sister could act so maliciously. However, looking back at the past incidents and connecting the dots, it was clear she was responsible for cutting holes in my clothes and taking my contact lenses. I confronted her, demanding answers, wanting to understand why she had done these things. At first, my mother tried to defuse the situation, not believing that Claire could be behind this, but I couldn't let it go and kept pressing until Claire tearfully admitted that she had done all of it. Hearing this, my mother's face shifted to surprise and concern. She gently asked Claire why she would do something so destructive. Claire, with tears in her eyes, confessed. Our grandparents had filled her head with negative ideas, constantly reminding her that I was adopted and didn't really belong with them. They also made her jealous, suggesting that I was trying to take away her inheritance, and that our parents liked me more than her. The manipulation had caused Claire to develop resentment toward me over time. I felt a surge of anger as I listened to Claire's confession. It was infuriating because I had been silent about my grandparents' hostility toward me for so long. Now, seeing them manipulate Claire, I felt they had crossed a line. I knew that if my father found out what was happening, he would react strongly and might even cut off Claire's contact with them. My mother seemed to understand this too, so she began urging me to let the matter go and promised to have a private talk with Claire. She emphasized that there was no need to inform my father about this issue right away. I questioned her decision, feeling that my father deserved to know the truth behind Claire's behavior since our grandparents were responsible. However, my mother insisted that involving my father could lead to unnecessary scolding for Claire, implying that I wasn't loving my sister enough. Reluctantly, I forgave Claire, trusting that my mother would handle the situation delicately. It's disheartening to say that despite my mother's efforts, the situation between us never improved. Claire's behavior toward me worsened over time. As she entered her teenage years, she became more cruel and hurtful. She mocked my appearance and weight, making me feel insecure about myself. Whenever I visited home from college, she would play cruel pranks on me and post them on social media, further humiliating me. What made it worse was her attitude toward my relationships. Whenever I introduced a boyfriend to my parents, Claire would try to flirt with them in front of me, even going as far as suggesting they could do better than me. This was not only disrespectful, but humiliating for me. Of course, I would complain to my mother, and my father would side with me, reminding Claire that she had no right to talk to me like that, but my mother often remained silent. I guess in her mind, she was still in denial about how deeply her parents had driven a wedge between Claire and me. Just 3 years ago, our grandparents invited everyone on an all-expenses-paid trip, but as expected, they conveniently excluded me. By then, I had learned to accept the exclusion, so it didn't bother me as much anymore. However, my father refused to go on the trip in protest. This decision upset both my mother and Claire. My mother, while understanding where my father was coming from, still tried to change his mind. Claire, on the other hand, had a heated argument with him, questioning why he would choose to withdraw from a family trip just because of me. She argued that I was an adult and didn't even want to go, which was ironic since I wasn't even invited. She tried to persuade him not to miss out on the trip because of me. Despite my mother's pleas, my father stood firm in his decision, refusing to go without me. After the trip, Claire posted a series of pictures with our cousins, captioning them with things like real family and partners for life. While it hurt to see my sister still viewed me as an outsider, I chose not to say anything to her. Over the years, I started going to therapy to heal and become more confident. This was also influenced by meeting the love of my life, Matt. He witnessed my sister's rudeness firsthand and encouraged me to stand up to her. Following his advice, I started talking to a therapist, where I discovered that the main reason I never argued or stood up to Claire was because, on some level, I felt guilty for not being our parents' biological child. The hurtful words from my grandparents during my childhood had somehow made me feel inferior and less deserving than Claire. As a result, I had let her walk all over me. However, as I began healing and understanding myself better, I gradually regained my self-worth and confidence. Nowadays, I no longer let Claire be rude to me. When we meet at dinners or family events, if she mutters a snide remark about me, I make sure to snap back at her. Initially, she was shocked to see me standing up for myself, but over time, she learned the hard way that I was no longer someone she could mess with. Now, she keeps her opinions to herself, no matter how much she might hate me. Unlike me, Claire doesn't have a good job, which is her biggest insecurity. She resents that I have higher degrees and a better-paying job. My financial stability allows me the freedom to travel wherever I want, while she still relies on our grandparents' support. Coming to the main event that led me to write on Reddit today, just a few months ago, I found out I was pregnant. It was incredible news for Matt and me since we had been trying for a while. When I called my parents to share the news, they were overjoyed and told me they couldn't wait to meet their future grandchild. Matt and I had been reading many parenting books to prepare and were excited to care for our child. We also put a lot of effort into redecorating and turning a spare room in our house into a nursery for our little one. This week, my baby's shower was scheduled, and my cousins on my father's side were taking care of all the preparations. I was so excited to reunite with my family for such a joyous occasion and celebrate with them. Just 2 days ago, my mother called to drop a bombshell. My sister Claire is getting a divorce. I was completely baffled as I had no idea her marriage was in trouble. To me, Claire's husband, Cameron, always seemed like a nice guy. Even though I wasn't invited to their wedding, I always remained polite and friendly with Cameron whenever we met at family gatherings. It turns out Cameron caught Claire sleeping with a colleague in their home. This discovery led to a major confrontation between them, resulting in Cameron kicking her out of the house. Claire then had no choice but to move in with our parents. Understandably, my father was furious with Claire. He firmly told her that if she couldn't respect the sanctity of marriage, then she deserved to be divorced and live on her own. My mother, on the other hand, felt this was just a mistake that could be fixed through couples therapy for Cameron and Claire. However, Cameron stood his ground on the divorce and cut all contact with my sister. Facing this, my mother told me it would be best to cancel the baby shower scheduled for this week because Claire was too distraught to handle the event. I was stunned by her suggestion and gently reminded her that I had sent out invitations and made arrangements, so canceling wasn't an option at that point. My mother insisted that Claire was in a very vulnerable state, and seeing me celebrate my baby's upcoming birth might be too overwhelming for her. I reminded my mother that the world didn't revolve around Claire and that I was having a baby shower for my child. It had nothing to do with my sister or her circumstances. I firmly expressed that if she felt uncomfortable attending, she could stay home with my sister, but my event would go on as planned. Clearly, my mother wasn't happy with my decision and continued to argue, but I didn't back down. I was furious when I ended the call with her. It's so exhausting to see my mother constantly supporting and favoring Claire over me. I thought that after our disagreement, she would drop the issue or realize how wrong she was to suggest canceling my own baby shower. Today, I was eagerly looking forward to the baby shower. My mother was supposed to pick me up from home, but we hadn't talked much since our last argument, so I made arrangements to go to the venue with one of my cousins. However, I was very surprised when my mother suddenly showed up to pick me up. I felt it was a hopeful sign that she was finally showing support and that we could move past our dispute. Imagine my surprise when my mother solemnly walked into my place to announce that she had some news to share. Initially, I feared the worst and felt a wave of anxiety wash over me. However, she reassured me that it was nothing serious and helped me sit on the couch so we could talk. Then she informed me that since I had refused to cancel the baby shower, she had decided to cancel it on my behalf. I was stunned, blinking in disbelief as she explained that she believed she had saved me from potential embarrassment. Confused and frustrated, I asked her what on earth she was talking about. My mother continued, saying it wouldn't be good for me or the family to celebrate while my sister was preparing for a divorce. In her opinion, canceling a simple baby shower was a small sacrifice to support my sister during such a difficult time. I felt utterly betrayed and furious. Every fiber of my being wanted to scream at her for how she had violated my trust. However, being pregnant, I forced myself to restrain those impulses. I squeezed my eyes shut, counted to 10, and desperately tried to regain my composure. When I opened my eyes again, the frustration and pain were still there, but I firmly asked my mother to leave the house immediately. I couldn't bear to have her presence around me after such a betrayal. At that moment, it felt like she had not only ruined my celebration, but also ignored my feelings and autonomy as an adult and a future mother. Since she left in a huff, I've been an emotional wreck. It feels like my emotions are on an endless roller coaster, and the tears just won't stop. I've had to seek comfort from Matt, and he's on his way back after hearing what happened. I can't believe my mother did this to me. A part of me wants to expose the truth behind my sister's divorce, knowing that my mother is probably trying to cover it up. That might be why she canceled my baby shower so no one would ask about it. I'm struggling with what's right and justified, which is why I'm posting this. Update 1, thank you all for your feedback. I've read every part and want to clarify a few things. First, Claire is to blame for my baby shower being canceled. My mother and sister have always been very close, so I'm sure my sister was the one who first came up with this idea. Additionally, on the day they canceled my baby shower, Claire texted me, saying not to be so sensitive about my event and that I shouldn't be too harsh on our mother. She went on to say that she didn't want our mother to constantly answer questions about her divorce and that my family should understand this. She also asked me to keep her affair with her boss a secret. Second, my mother tried to call me several times afterward to continue persuading me and justifying her actions, but this time Matt wanted to talk to her. He started the conversation by telling her what he thought and made it clear that it was ridiculous for her to cancel my baby's shower without my knowledge. He firmly stated that she would never see our child if she continued to blatantly disrespect me like this. My mother was shocked by this, but after what she did to me, I couldn't help but agree with my husband's decision. Finally, my father is not talking to my mother or my sister after finding out what they did. Since they canceled my baby's shower, he and Matt have discussed and decided to throw a new one, which my mother and sister will not be invited to. I've also spoken to all my cousins, who reached out to see how I was doing after receiving my mother's message about canceling the baby shower. They all agreed that my mother had crossed the line and didn't want anything to do with her this time. Also, I've received some messages from people asking why I never told my father how our grandparents influenced Claire's negative views about me. Honestly, I trusted my mother to handle this issue with Claire. I didn't want to cause unnecessary conflict in the family. Sometimes, as children, we end up in situations where we choose to stay silent even if it's uncomfortable. As a child, I hoped my mother would stand up for me and protect me from her parents, but sadly, that never happened. Clearly, she favored her biological daughter over her adopted one. Moreover, as I mentioned, my confidence and world were impacted by the experiences I went through as a child. Update 2. Today, I have a big update to share. I felt that since both my mother and Claire refused to acknowledge any fault in their actions, I needed to teach them a lesson that would stay with them for life. I took your advice and sat down to draft a detailed email to every family member, explaining why my sister is getting a divorce. I didn't hesitate to detail her affair with her boss and how she broke her husband's trust when he discovered them, but I didn't stop there. I also emphasized how my mother canceled my baby's shower out of shame over my sister's life choices and not wanting to face anyone. I crafted the email meticulously, ensuring that every word would ignite the anger and frustration in them that they made me feel. I felt entirely justified in my actions as I pressed send on that email. It was my way of standing up for myself, letting everyone know the truth behind the facade my mother and sister were trying to maintain about our perfect family. As you can imagine, my mother and sister reacted exactly as I predicted. They started calling me in a rage, leaving me voicemails filled with accusations. Consciously, I chose not to answer, letting their calls go to voicemail so I could listen to them later. My mother kept texting me, begging me to send another email retracting my words, and emphasizing that I shouldn't shame my poor sister, but I ignored her. I'm sure both of them are getting calls from the whole family now, trying to verify the details in my email. I have no regrets about what I did. I'm certain my mother will think twice before interfering in my life again. Surprisingly, that's not all. My grandparents also tried to contact me. They must have read my email and are clearly upset about me exposing my sister. Despite their efforts to reach out, I ignored their calls for my peace of mind. I'm sure they're even angrier now, which only pleases me more. Update 3. Since many of you wanted another update on my situation, here it is. I finally had my baby's shower, and it was grand. My cousins and close family friends came together to give me the most wonderful experience. Thanks to my father and Matt, the decorations were perfect, the food was delicious, and the atmosphere was filled with joy and excitement. It was a day full of love and positivity, and I couldn't be more grateful to those who made it happen. As for my mother and Claire, they're having a rough time. My father has reached his limit with Claire's behavior after she came home drunk from a date with her boss. To clarify, the guy she cheated with is married and has kids, so it's obviously very wrong. When my father saw her condition, he finally had enough and told her to leave the house. He felt it was time for her to take responsibility and start living independently. Since she had never lived alone in her life, Claire had attended college in our city to continue living at home, and after graduation she moved straight in with her ex-husband Cameron. my father was right to kick her out. My mother initially objected to his decision, but eventually relented when he told her she could leave with Claire if she wanted. I don't know if Claire is now living in her apartment or couch surfing with friends, but I'm glad she never called me for help. I know many of you were worried about the impact my mother's actions would have on my parents' marriage. Despite everything, I don't think they'll get divorced. They've been together for so long, and despite the challenges they face, they seem committed to staying together. While my mother's actions may have strained our relationship, I still value their marriage and hope they can find a way to resolve their differences. It's disappointing that neither my mother nor Claire has apologized. Though my mother has tried to contact me several times, her messages only talk about how hurt she is, never acknowledging how much she hurt me. It seems she still doesn't fully grasp the impact of her actions. What really bothers me is that she could have addressed these issues between me and my sister long ago when we were young, but she deliberately ignored the warning signs, and now it's too late for us. Our family is fractured now, and I blame her for that. I plan to cut off contact with my sister and mother permanently because I don't want my child to be surrounded by negativity or hatred. As for Matt and me, we're doing great. He's a wonderful partner and always takes care of me. This might be my final update on this issue because I want to move on and focus on enjoying the last weeks of my pregnancy. Update 4. This update comes after the birth of my baby, who, by the way, is a healthy girl, so I'm thrilled. Also, Matt has been my rock, especially with everything that has happened in the family or what's left of it. I don't know where to start, but I'll try my best to explain everything so you understand what's happened over the past few months. The last thing I mentioned was that my father was very angry with my mother and sister for their favoritism over the years. Well, now it's my parents who are getting a divorce, or rather, it was my father who decided. My mother is still fighting to prevent it from happening. This started a few months ago, shortly after my father kicked Claire out of the house. One day, Claire returned to talk to my father because she had nowhere to stay in the city and wanted to convince him to take her back. My father refused again, saying he couldn't keep indulging a spoiled brat like her because what a good father should have done was raise her better. And that's when Claire dropped the bomb. She said that he wasn't her father anyway. She regretted it the moment she said it, but my father forced her to explain what she meant. She quickly left the house, and my father started calling her, leaving her hundreds of messages because he wanted an explanation. Then my mother came home from shopping, and he demanded an explanation from her too. When he saw my mother's frightened expression, he knew exactly what was happening, so he packed his bags and came to live with us for a while. Thankfully, we have a big house, so there was room for my father. Eventually, everything came to light through a paternity test, where my father painfully discovered that Claire was not his daughter. My mother suspected it and had told Claire because they were so close. Apparently, she had an affair with someone, and that led to her pregnancy. The chances of my father being the biological father were slim because they had been trying for so long. But my mother saw that she was finally going to have a child and decided to keep everything quiet. She's been trying to convince my father to go to couples therapy, and that the mistake can easily be fixed, but my father completely rejected it and filed for divorce a few days later. That's when the family split. One side is my mother's family, the other is my father's. It's not hard to know which side I'm on. I haven't spoken to Claire or my mother because they're both blocked, but I did exchange a few words when my mother came to the house to talk to my father, though it was more like asking her to leave. Anyway, my father has finally gotten back on his feet and asked not to pay anything in the divorce because we're in a state where infidelity is important in the divorce process. On the other hand, I know Claire has moved in with my mother, so all of this worked out quite well for her because she got what she wanted. She hasn't even bothered to contact my father to see how he's doing or anything, more evidence that she truly is my mother's biological daughter because she can only think about herself. Update 5. This update is to let you know that my parents' divorce is finalized, and my mother had to sell her house. She was ordered to split the assets in half, so my mother had to sell to pay my father his share. As for my father, he didn't have to pay anything to my mother because although she didn't work and he was the only one doing so, infidelity played in his favor. So what I know is that my mother and sister are living together on the money from the house sale and Claire's salary, though that won't last long, but that's all I know, because the two families barely speak to each other after everything that happened.